Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another Quickfire review. I have the pleasure of being joined by David Jenkin today to talk about the Gills. Big Gillingham fan, a season that had offered so much promise. A late playoff push did look on the cards, but a couple of difficult results, especially the one at the Kassam Stadium, probably has put play to that now. But nonetheless, it seems to have been a good campaign, David. And I'll start with a question that we do with all of these: is how have you performed against your pre-season expectations?
Yeah, so I think overall, probably much better than expected in some aspects. I mean, any chance of the playoffs with a team like Gills is a massive thing for us, to be honest. I wouldn't say I wouldn't go along with Steve Evans' claims that we've got the smallest budget in the league,
No,
but I certainly don't think that we've got the funds of some of the teams in the league, and to be in and around the conversation with some of those teams that are up there is enough in itself for me. You know, I suppose, especially recently, if we'd held on to some results, we could still be maybe in that conversation. I suppose, as you mentioned, the really frustrating the really frustrating result of the Kassam, and of course, most recently, the 2-2 draw with Northampton after another lead, and screwing that one
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
saw
So.
that one.
But yeah, like I mean, to be for our team to even be in the conversation of the playoffs is a huge thing. And I mean, credit to Evans. I know he's not everybody. Like I know some Gills fans will watch this and they'll be like, okay, yeah, I want him out, or some will be like, I want him in. It's a very, very divided fan base with Evans in charge, but you cannot deny what the man's been able to do so far along the last two seasons. Looks on track for the best points record we've had since Jed was in charge with 69. I believe the 2015-16 season. So it looks like, like you can't really complain. It's progress, and progress is good, especially, to make progress like that during a pandemic compared to a season that was completely out of a pandemic is a good season in my book.
Yeah, very positive. Um, what player do you? Well, which player to you has been the best this season for Gills?
So I was considering this. I think a few players come to mind. Of course, the likes of Carl Dempsey, huge for us. Robbie Cundy coming in January was big as well. Um, there's probably no one in that squad for me that has the heart of Stuart O'Keefe since coming back from that broken leg to put in some of the
Yeah,
performances he has this season, which is just outstanding. But I cannot sleep on Mr. Goals himself for Gills this season, for Dane Oliver. Um, the impact that man's had since joining us from Northampton completely transformed our front line, really, compared to what we've experienced the last few seasons. And for me, he may be, with a little extra, he may be that Tommy Hughes replacement that we've been looking for a couple of seasons. Not really had that sort of impact, gone for a few strikers. Of course, we tried it with Akinde. Hasn't quite worked out. I would be surprised if he's still here next year. But a player like Verdane, I'd be more than happy to see him back at Priestfield next year, because I think he fully deserves it after the performances he's put in this year, from going from League Two to League One, and he's fit in as if he's been here for years.
yeah, he's been absolutely superb. I think everyone would agree with that. Any player that surprised you, good or bad?
I think I'd have to say Robbie Cundy, actually. Coming in January, being on loan in a League Two, a very good League Two Cambridge side, who of course beat us earlier in the season towards the start. Um, but yeah, for him to come in January for me was a real blessing. Obviously, unfortunately, it didn't work out so well with our Arsenal loanees, with Zach Medley not really doing what we thought he would do. So that was a bit of a shame. But then again, that seems to be the staple of the Evans sides. Um, Over the last two seasons, take a chance on some loanees towards the start of the season, then try to fix those changes in January for a late playoff push, which seems to be exactly what he did last season and exactly what he's tried to do this season. Of course, it's not worked out quite as well as we hoped. But yeah, I
Speaking
mean, he's
of,
come in and he's sort of transformed that defence alongside Jack Tucker,
yeah,
and but to have a young talent like Jack and to have someone like Robbie come in as well, it's made a real solid defensive opportunity for us, especially with the fullbacks that are, of course, consistently pushing up, and decent performances out of both of them too.
yeah, and that brings me on to the next one. Really, who's been your best signing this season? Do you think?
So of course, as I mentioned before, Verdane Oliver has been a bit of a revelation for us. But actually, I think it's got to be Kyle Dempsey. Um, so he's nearly played every game for us this season, of course, about 38 games. So he didn't play some of the games just due to obviously a little niggle and fitness issues at the start of the season. But considering like he's had to come in, take over from Max Lamer, who of course had his departure to Bristol Rovers. I feel like he's one of a number of players that we sincerely risk losing to the Championship this season, given how good he's been. I mean, the guy's had 12 goal involvements from midfield, which says quite a bit when I believe only Vidane Oliver in our squad has had more. You may have other stats onto that, but I believe only Vidane has had more, which from midfield and as in terms of how captaincy goes, to step into that role and have the impact he has had this season has been quite something, to be honest with you.
It's been absolutely brilliant. And which player from an opposition side of point of view has impressed you the most? Any opposition players really caught your eye?
So I actually asked in one of the Gills forums because I wasn't too sure on this one, so I wanted to get some general fan consensus. There was two that really stood out. So should I say Jorge Grant, in keeping spirit with the podcast, and Ricky Dembele was another one. But I think ultimately I went with Dembele. Although Jorge Grant absolutely played us off the park at our place, I cannot fault Dembele's performance the other day. You know, we may have won that game 1-0 and probably quite fortunately in the end, but there is no denying how good that man was that day. He was going past our players like they weren't even there. It looked like you know, we were an under-18s team at times and they were up in the Prem. You know, Dembele was. I don't suppose that even if Peterborough go up, I wouldn't be surprised if another team higher towards the table end up picking him up because
I think
quite the quality. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years we see him playing in the Prem. So
yeah, he's a good player, absolutely great player. Best opposition team you've seen?
For me, it's Lincoln. I think despite 3-0 away at their place and them 3-0 at ours. For me, as an overall performance for a team, they just completely outplayed us at the park. You know, we've got that sort of Sky Sports curse, let's say. Whenever we tend to be on Sky Sports, we tend to lose, and that was no different for this season either. Yeah, and they just, in general, you know, I suppose there are a few questionable refereeing decisions for me in that game, but still, there's no denying the quality that they had. And of course, I think the only reason we ended up really defeating them so convincingly in the second game was, as you know, as we spoke about just before we started recording, was down to the injury crisis and obviously the COVID-ravaged squad that they then ended up having. But bar that, you know, Lincoln should definitely be up there around that area at the end of the season. But if they're not, in terms of playoffs, I don't doubt that Michael Appleton will make sure that they are by the end of the season.
No, he is a great coach. I've been advocating Lincoln all season, and I think they'll go on and do very, very well. Worst team you've seen? Any team that's like really not impressed you?
I mean, I'm gonna have to, not just down to a rivalry, and I'm sure in some ways you might be pleased to hear this, but I'm gonna have to say Swindon as a mutual thing between the two of us in a way as well. And it's not just down to the rivalry. I mean, on both occasions we beat them, you know, 2-0 and then 3-1, both pretty convincingly, apart from a slight challenge in the away fixture where, you know, obviously they went 1-0 up and then after that it just sort of ended for them. Although really, it's, to be honest with you, it's a shame that they've had kind of the troubles they've had off the pitch across the season, you know, where they've been dealing with who owns the club and things like that, which it's just insane how you can not know that sort of stuff. And, you know, I think even despite those off-field issues, considering the season they had last year in League Two, I think they fell way below where I personally expected them to be. I was expecting them to be around mid-table, as much as that pains me to say. I was expecting it, you know,
no, I'd agree.
Didn't
think they go straight back down. Yeah,
rather than straight back down immediately. But I guess when things aren't quite working behind the scenes, especially in a pandemic like this, you know, you can't really expect much different.
What's your most used formation? Or put it another way, which formation have you enjoyed watching the Gills in the most this season?
There's probably two that we've used most consistently. Typical Gills 4-1-2-1-2 tends to be one that's brought up by every manager we have in every season. But I think the one I've enjoyed the most is probably the 4-2-3-1. The way we've kind of utilised it when especially towards the turn of the year when Callum Slattery came in, and the performances he was putting in from Cam, of course, with the reintroduction of Ollie Lee coming back, and of course Stuart O'Keefe in there with Kyle Dempsey as well. There's been some very strong performances from us in that 4-2-3-1, and actually that tends to be the formation we run when we've had some very good wins and held on to those leads to boot as well.
Yeah, no, I think you've been impressive this season. Far too often labelled a long ball team, when actually that's one facet of the game that you do well, but there's plenty of others as well. What's the worst moment of the season been?
Arguably, it could be being labelled a long ball team, but I would probably have to say that it's probably our last couple of games.
I was going to expect you to say the Oxford one, really, given what that means in terms of your playoff push.
I think Oxford or Northampton probably the worst ones for me, because you take a lead in one of them, take a lead in the other one, and you look like you're going to convincingly win the game both times, actually. Both games with about 15 minutes to go, and then it just all falls apart at the end. A 3-2 loss and a 2-2 draw. If we'd won those games, we could have been fifth, and maybe asking questions as to whether we could be around those spots. I don't think we'd ultimately end up in those spots, but to even keep ourselves in the conversation is something that would have been quite nice. But you're never going to be around those playoff spots or pushing for promotion if you can't hold on to a 2-goal lead in either one of those games.
No, I agree. Yeah, your best moment of the season, to bring it into a lighter note.
I think again, it's probably just being in the conversation of the playoffs. Like for us, for a team like us, we're not. In this league, people consider us to be a bit of a joke team, I think, sometimes. But I think this season we've really showed that actually, we've got we're not just having an ex-player in charge. We've got someone that has a little bit of prowess, maybe not the most popular figure, and we know that throughout the league that he's not the most popular figure, and amongst our fans he's quite a divisive figure as well. But you can't fault what he's done so far last season and for this season, especially during a COVID-ravaged team. What could you possibly want more than an experienced coach who's going to put you in a position where it's potential for playoffs with let's say one of the lower budgets, because I don't believe the claims that we have the lowest budget by any means. There's certainly teams in this league that have much lower budgets than we do, but I would say that even given that, to be around the conversation of the likes of with the spending that they've done in terms of giants of the football game like Sunderland and Hull and teams like that, to be in that conversation is something special in itself.
Indeed. What do you miss most about attending matches in person?
For me, it's the atmosphere. I mean, you just don't get that looking at on a screen on iFollow in comparison. I was thinking about a game that could really illustrate this, and I was thinking back to the third round FA Cup against West Ham.
That would have been great, wouldn't it?
Just don't get that atmosphere. And we got the opportunity, of course, to be at Priestfield for that. And I've never heard a roar of the crowd so much in my life. I mean, football is nothing without fans, especially with a team like the Gills. That I think, for us, our players really, really thrive on fans, and to not be able to see the likes of Vidane Oliver and Kyle Dempsey come in and potentially not see them if they go next season, and be able to see those kind of players in person is a real shame. But I suppose needs must in terms of a global pandemic. But
yeah, indeed. I know it's early, but looking ahead to next season, what kind of expectations are you holding for it?
I'd like to be hopeful, and I'd like to say that we'd be pushing more towards the playoffs in a similar way to what we've done this season. But I think that might be expecting a little too much. I think a challenge for those spots again, like sort of a similar season to what we've had, but hopefully holding on to a few more results that push us more into that echelon would be nice. But I think 8th or 9th or so would be a positive finish for us. Certainly an improvement. I think
it depends a lot, doesn't it? If you keep your best players, that's the big thing, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, I think at least 4 or 5 of them could be going. The likes of Jordan Graham has had a very good season. Vidane Oliver could be taken up by a club higher up. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Dempsey is. Conor Ogilvie with the season he's had too. Even Jack Tucker to a certain degree. Like, there are definitely players within there, and of course loans that we've got that aren't going to last. But yeah, I think, do you know what though, James? To go from at the start of the season, pre-season, to have 7 players 7 professional players in a squad, for a manager to be able to build a squad and then somehow be challenging for the playoffs off of that small of a squad starting off is nothing short of an incredible achievement, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I think it has been an incredible achievement, and I think for Gillingham to have so many players in their side currently that would attract attention from clubs higher up is a testament to the recruitment, because they've all come in and they've all performed really well. So it is great. Final question: sum up your season in 3 words without swearing.
Okay, okay. Typically, consistently inconsistent. I think that just about sums Gills up. We're very good at being inconsistent, but we do it on a consistent basis. We go on a good run for a few games and then mess it up again. Sort of, tease ourselves with the playoffs and then bring ourselves right back down. It's the typical Gills way.
Indeed, David. Thank you so much for joining me on this quickfire season review. Where can we find you on Twitter before we go?
So I'm at David Jenkin 16.
Excellent. So give him a follow, everyone. Nearly knocked my mic over there. Give him a follow, everyone. He's a really good chap to talk football with, especially Gills related if you are that way inclined. Thank you for watching this. Really appreciate your support, as we do with all our patrons as well. We'll be back very soon with another quickfire review. Thank you for watching.